friendo, Steve here.
And Larson.
Welcome back to Going in Raw, the only pro wrestling podcast you need to be listening to. Of course, we're going to do these every week when they're on the dark side of the ring. We're going to talk about Jimmy Superfly Snuka and the death of Nancy Argentino. This is right up my alley, man, because I'm all about the Dateline and the ID channel and all that stuff. So
this is right in your wheelhouse then, because this felt like Dateline, another 48 hours, any of those procedural investigative crime programs. This fit right into that kind of template.
Yeah.
Instead of hosted by Chris Hansen, it was hosted by Chris Jericho.
Chris Jericho, exactly, Le Champion. So I don't really know, what's a good place to start here, because this is kind of a different thing. It's as if we're talking about a Dateline.
Yeah.
What was your overall? I guess what was your overall impression of? I guess we can start here. Did he totally killed that girl, right?
I mean, yeah. I mean, he's at least
okay. Review over.
I mean, I guess the question is, was it an accidental thing? You know,
yeah.
I mean, his initial story was, as he put it, wrestling, probably fighting. If the previous history of physical altercations is to be believed. And during the course of the fight, she fell, hit her head, and then a day later passed away.
Yeah.
So I guess one would maybe piece together they got to fight. Somehow she fell over, whether she was pushed or not, and then hit her head, and then a couple of days later, a day later, due to the head trauma, passed away. Although the coroner's report, I don't understand a lot of the technical YPMP forensics jargon. Like what was the meat blow of the head, METE?
Okay, yeah.
Because based on what they found, and they worded it in the documentary, and the wording escapes me now, but the conclusion of which was based on the injury she suffered. They pretty much said, hey, you should investigate this as a homicide. If it was a simple situation of she fell, banged her head on, the dresser in the hotel, and then died, I don't know how that would be conclusive with those findings per se. I just don't know. I'm not a forensics guy. I've watched some Law and Order, and that's the extent of my forensic knowledge.
Didn't the autopsy? Wasn't there bruising on the throat?
Yeah, I was at the funeral, the funeral parlor.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Man, there was a lot. It totally feels like he did it probably out of roid rage. I mean, let's just honestly,
then one thing we found out from this too was that he had himself a pretty serious cocaine habit.
Yeah.
And because of that, he was becoming less reliable. In fact, after this happened, the Nancy Argentino's death, apparently his drug habit kicked up several more notches, and he became even more unreliable, and that's when WWE cut ties with him.
Yeah,
and they did the indie circuit, autograph signing, so on and so forth. Probably the interview that stuck out the most was with the police chief, who was the chief of Allentown.
Yeah,
it was Whitehall Township, I believe, was the actual municipality that he was the police chief of, and he seemed to have basically no knowledge of this investigation whatsoever.
Man, I was talking to you about this off camera yesterday, and I don't know if it's because somebody would simply want the attention of being on a Dateline type thing. I mean, I know I've heard there are cops who literally want to be on the show. Cops.
Yeah, hold on a second. MET, M-E-T, the definition of that is dispense or allot justice, a punishment, or harsh treatment. So I guess the idea that she suffered a meat blow to the head was that it was delivered by somebody, I guess.
Okay. But this guy either was lying. It honestly, his body language just screamed, "You're lying out your ass," because there are I've got. I listen to several podcasts about how tricky memory is, and how memory is not a very reliable thing. However, there are certain core memories that people should retain just factually. Larson, have you ever talked to Steve, to me?
Well, I'm talking to you right now.
Right. What class do you remember being in a class with me when we first started hanging out called astronomy?
Several classes. Yeah, I remember several classes we were in, but astronomy was one of those.
I recall being in that class with you. I recall Bonnie Douglas being in that class with us.
I remember when our teacher said, "What does a blue and a red light make?" and I said purple.
I remember all that stuff. There are certain key events in your life that you just remember. You just know. You just remember, right? This guy, when asked about stuff that he'd remember if it's a solid yes or no, was so dancing around stuff. And he'd start darting his eyes everywhere. Like, why is he going to be on this thing if he knows that every single question they're going to ask is going to be something that he is not going to want to answer truthfully on? Because this investigation was obviously the worst possible police investigation I have seen.
It was not good.
It was terrible. It was awful.
One instance that they point out, well, there's two major ones. So Jimmy's story, the second or third time around. First, he said that she fell while they were wrestling, fighting, whatever, bumped her head, eventually passed away. And then he changed that story to they're on their way to Allentown, Pennsylvania. She had to go to the bathroom. He pulled off the side of the road. She went off, did her business, came back to the car, slipped, fell, bumped her head on the road, and then a day or so later died. And then during the course of this episode, we find out that Tonga Kid, Sam Fatu, says he was in the car with them.
Yeah.
And so at no point did the police, the chief just found out about Sam's recollection while he was being interviewed.
Yeah.
And during the episode, they mentioned that at no point did the police take Snuka to the spot where he pulled over.
Yeah.
Which is like the most basic thing. All right, this is your story. Tell me where you pulled over.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the thing I got from the chief. Not necessarily that he was hiding per se anything other than potentially his own department's potentially incompetence.
Yeah. Yeah.
That he was trying to create a narrative that would make it sound like we did the best. Because that was like the major thing he said. Half the questions he asked was like, we did the best we could.
Yeah, because they would, he kept on going back to that. And like when he couldn't answer a question, he would just go back to, well, again, I figure they did the best investigation they could.
Yeah.
And it's like, why are you even here? Like, what is just say, no, I'm not going to revisit that. Because he has to know this is not a point of pride.
Well, he doesn't even seem like he was hands-on with this investigation at all.
Yeah.
He was the chief of police. He wasn't necessarily the one investigating anything. That was the idea I got. He wasn't really investigating anything.
Yeah.
He didn't even seem terribly familiar with a lot of the stuff he was that was being posed to him. Somewhere was a situation that, whether the officers who actually did the investigation, either they didn't want to participate, aren't around to participate, whatever the case may be. And they were like, well, who is the chief then? This guy, fine, let's get him on. So we have some representative from Whitehall Township law enforcement on the episode to get that perspective on the show.
Yeah.
I don't know. One of the major things they kind of alluded to as well in this particular episode, and one of the ongoing rumors and conspiracy about this is that, and this is all from Snuka's account of events in his book, was Vince showed up at the police station with the briefcase. And after that, it seemed like the investigation was over.
Yeah.
There was no notes of that interview, no detailed notes of the interview, even though it was like an hour or two long.
And when asked about that interview, the police chief said, well, I guess nothing important was said in that interview if there are no notes about it. The hell? That don't make any sense.
So I guess that led to speculation, rumors, and conspiracy that somehow Vince brought a briefcase of money in and paid off the cops. Essentially, that's what I've heard.
I thought they were going to address that a bit more directly because they talk about the briefcase, but they don't really like. You have to know about the rumors about that in order to really put those pieces together. Like if you don't know about that, the briefcase is just sort of a briefcase. You know what I mean?
Well, they insinuate Vince showed up with briefcase. After he showed up with briefcase, the investigation pretty much stopped.
Yeah, I know, but it wasn't as direct as I thought it was going to be.
I mean, I think because there's zero evidence that anything of that
you want to be careful with
happened.
That. Yeah, for
exactly, because literally the only account of the briefcase is from Snuka in his autobiography.
Yeah. I thought, oddly enough, Snuka's wife or widow, came off as fairly well reasoned and not. She painted her husband's side of how he felt post incident, and she basically said all that she could say. I mean that she's presenting anyways, and I don't. There didn't seem to be any reason to think that she didn't come across as deceptive. If Snuka was either lying to himself or lying to her, either one of those, it doesn't sound like at any point he opened up and was like, "Oh, I totally killed her." She actually seems like a pretty with it person, and she didn't give anything but her recollection of what his feelings on it outwardly were. And so it was kind of interesting to hear because she didn't really, she said, well, he said that, let these people say what they're going to say. There's nothing I could, they're going to say that regardless. There's nothing I can do to prove them wrong. I know what happened there and it didn't, So I don't know. She was kind of interesting just in that, you'd figure somebody like that's hiding somebody would come, or that's hiding something would come across a bit more like they're hiding something.
She didn't necessarily come off like she was hiding anything. Actually, I thought her account of things was fairly even-handed.
Yeah, totally. Vince didn't look great in this. There was the bit about how, I guess, for a spell, Snuka couldn't read. And he would Vince would shove papers in front of him before shows and say, "Hey, if you don't sign this, you're not going to get paid." Mm-hmm. Now that could be standard procedure for, hey, here's an invoice, or something that we've drawn up for you, or who knows what it is. You're signing away all your likeness rights. Who knows,
Yeah. Who knows?
But I don't know. I think it just goes more into the carny aspect of Vince McMahon in general, which we still see to this day. With the stuff with the revival that's been coming out over the weekend.
My goodness, I know.
So yeah, I mean, he didn't look great either, of course. So yeah, that was kind of interesting. The Tonga Kid was also interviewed. Mm-hmm. As you mentioned, he was in the car, or he claims to have been in the car on the way to Allentown. His was kind of interesting because I think in his heart he wants to believe that Snuka didn't do it, but seemingly he didn't know a lot of the details about all this stuff, including Nancy's name, which is kind of bizarre. But seemingly he wanted to believe that Snuka didn't do it. But when presented with certain facts that alleged that apparently he didn't know about or had forgotten about or chosen to forgotten about, he got very uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. They asked him, "Hey, do you know what his story is?" And he was like, "Uh-uh." And he was like, that Nancy fell out of the car, or she tripped on her way back to the car. And he was like, "Yeah, no, that never happened." And then he sort of was like, and then this might have been the editing, obviously, but as he's getting up and walking away, he sort of mumbles, "You're asking me about stuff that happened 30 years ago," kind of resentful of the interview. It's like, crap, what did I just get myself into? Because I think for him, it boiled down to his statement of, "I knew Jimmy. Jimmy wasn't like this. Jimmy wouldn't do this." Mm-hmm. And so Jimmy's very mad, George. And I mean, that's one thing I've gleaned from both watching Dateline and talking to our good friend's ex-girlfriend now, who was a public defender. Mm-hmm. And the assertion that you can know if a person is capable of murder or not is kind of overrated. It's not easy to do, especially when either cocaine or steroids or a mixture of both are brought into the occasion. That's literally changing your brain chemicals right there, which changes who you are.
Totally.
So, so yeah, that's all interesting. Interesting character, though. I mean, it's funny because you look back at one thing that I kind of find interesting. You look back at that period of time, and of course, Hogan is the guy who emerged as the guy, right?
Yeah.
I don't know, because everybody in this purports, and I know sometimes it's sort of to build the narrative, oh, he could have been the biggest thing. But I'm not sure, Snuka definitely had a presence and a look. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure if he ever had that thing that Hogan had when he'd look into the camera and he'd reach the audience, which he obviously had just, a plethora of. I never got that. Watching a Snuka promo, watching him in the ring, it's obvious he was he was a really fantastic athlete who could do some really cool stuff.
Yeah.
And he had a very distinct, unique look. I'm not sure he ever could have been face of the company.
I don't know. I mean, not to the degree Hogan was, obviously, but when Snuka was the hot thing in WWF, that was pre-Hogan.
Yeah, sure.
That was early 80s, and that's when WWF was still a regional promotion.
Yeah, exactly, I'm not sure if he could have been the guy to put the company on its back nationally, but I don't know. He was supremely over in the region, so who knows?
He was super over, and so you never know. But yeah, I don't know if he had the ability to, speak through television camera, connect people sitting in their homes the same way Hogan had. After watching the episode, I did a little research about the Vince meeting they have no record of, and found this excerpt from the original story, I guess, from the Morning Call in 2013 that talks about this meeting that WrestleZone has this excerpt of. And of course, it mentions everybody who was present at the meeting. It's three detectives, assistant DA, and who is this other individual? Has a last name, but I don't. Oh, sorry. Medical examiner. Sorry. And then one of the people there who was the assistant DA, who's now a judge in the area as of 2013, talks about this meeting, said that Vince did all the talking. And he said, quote, "I remember Vince McMahon being what Vince McMahon has always been, very effusive. He was very protective, a showman." And he said that he couldn't recall specifics of the conversation. He was the mouthpiece trying to direct the conversation. Someone else, one of the detectives, said that McMahon gave authorities the phone numbers of wrestlers and managers they wanted to speak with. And then, that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
As far as McMahon's role, as far as anybody remembers. So, I mean, if there's no proof of any funny business happening, they really can't make that claim and something like this.
Yeah, I didn't know how. So, in fact, I had only heard about the briefcase thing like a couple days ago on like a random Twitter thing, and I was like, oh, I wonder if that's just one of the things that was out there. So yeah, if there's no substantiation behind
you can't put that
stuff.
You're leaving yourself open for a lawsuit.
And I would imagine that just indicates just how flimsy that rumor is.
It's completely flimsy. Yeah, the only account of any briefcase is from Snuka's own account. In his book. Yeah, that's it. No other account of anybody having a briefcase.
Everybody in the 80s had briefcases. That's the thing.
That was what you carried. Because you had to. If you had more than like 3 pieces of paper, you need a briefcase.
If you're going bowling and you want to bring any sheet of paper, you're bowling. If you know you're going to go home with your bowling scorecard, you got to bring a briefcase because where else are you going to put it?
There weren't these back then. We could toss everything on.
These didn't exist. Nobody really had. Yet, I mean, I guess fax machines kind of were a thing then.
Yeah, I mean, that was just around the time the VCRs were getting into homes.
Exactly. Those were expensive, too.
Yeah, they were. Yeah, they were. I still have my original copy of Wrath of Khan my dad got when he got our VCR. First movie we bought, Wrath of Khan. Sitting out my bookcase.
Admitted kick. Let's see here. Yeah, I mean, I'm glad that the family seemed to get some sort of closure in that Snuka at least had to confront this stuff, even if it was later in life.
And even if there wasn't a trial, at least in a situation where the police decided there's enough evidence to charge him, and then based on his kind of deteriorating health, physically and apparently mentally, it was determined that he wasn't fit to stand trial. And about 10 days after the trial was canceled, he passed away.
Yeah. So, I mean, hopefully that gives them some sense of, but man, to be 23 years old or 22 or whatever she was, early 20s, and tasked with handling, because that's what they said. It was like at first she was just his girlfriend, but then when Buddy Rogers got tired of being his handler, because he would want to just incessantly do cocaine while Buddy Rogers was driving, they handed that task off to a 22-year-old. And yeah, that's really sad.
I'm assuming as well that the WWF knew that Snuka at that point was already married too.
Yeah, that's a good point.
With several children.
Yeah. So everything was drenched in cocaine back then, man.
I know.
But stories of the NBA. Oh my God.
Oh gosh, I know. So next week is the story of Dino Bravo. That's one I don't really know anything about. So
all I know of this one was because I just read the one line from this one line synopsis from the Dark Side of the Rings tweet. You'll appreciate this. It's
I saw that about he's having a program against Hogan in Montreal, but they didn't go through with it because they thought he would get the Dino Bravo get the cheers.
I wonder if that's the crux of the episode is that he. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know either. But yeah, it should be interesting. That's the kind of stuff that I with Dark Side of the Ring. That's the stuff to me that's most interesting is behind the scenes shenanigans stuff.
The ins and outs of the business. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So anyways, join us for that next Sunday. Thanks everybody for tuning in. We appreciate it. And until next time, we'll talk to you later.
Goodbye.